Welcome to How to Use Watercolor Paints with Mrs. Hosbach. Even though the paints aren't connected in the tray, you should never take them out to use them. There's no reason to do that. Instead, we leave them right where they are so that they can stay in the correct order from red to red violet. We begin using watercolor paints by taking a wet paintbrush and giving each color a little wake up with a dot of water, unless they're already awake. Watercolor paint is called watercolor because we need lots of water to move the paint. And that's why we always use these soft bristled brushes when we're using watercolor paint, because they hold a lot of water and our brush should always stay wet. The water in the brush is actually what helps it to kind of pull the paint into the bristles. When we're loading our paintbrush with color, just the tippy top of the brush should touch the paint, right here. The metal part should never touch the actual paint or even come close to it, because that means we're pushing too hard and we could get way too much paint on our paintbrush. And watercolor paint is meant to be see-through, so we don't want it to go on really thick or sticky. If you accidentally do forget to keep your brush wet and you load your paintbrush up without enough water, you could run the risk of picking up way more paint than we should. This is probably enough paint to cover an entire paper. So if you notice that the paint is really creamy and sticky and you do pick up too much, you can remove the extra paint just like that so that it doesn't get wasted in the water. If we paint a color next to another color that's wet, it will try to kind of blend and join with that color. So if we don't want that effect, we need to make sure to let one color dry before painting next to it with another color. If we go to paint with our brush and realize that there's too much paint because it's not see-through, the best thing you can do is just get a little bit more water on your brush and spread it out quickly to make sure that it won't dry sticky and thick. If we want to do color mixing, we make sure our brush is really wet. We take our first color and transfer it to a mixing palette by using the edge of the mixing tray to help that color in. Even if we need more of that color, we're gonna get a little water first so the brush is wet and it can pull that color into the bristles of the brush. And then use the edge of that tray to transfer that color into the container. Before mixing with your next color, we're gonna wash the brush off, make sure that our brush is nice and wet again, and then pull our second color in by touching just the tippy top of that brush and using the edge of the container to add it to our mixture, and then we can mix it up and use it on our paper. When we return our watercolor trays to the cart, we should keep the tray open. The colors should always stay in that same order because we're not taking them out to use them. And we should lay them so they're kind of overlapping on top of the tray right next to it, just like that. When finishing with our watercolor brushes, we can just even wash them if our water's not too dirty right in the cup. And then we organize them back in with the big bristles together and the little bristles together, always straight up in our cup. If we put them down in the cup, then they dry and they'll kind of curve and remember the wrong direction. In a paintbrush, we always want it to be pointy. Our mixing tray just needs to be turned sideways and gently rinsed underneath the water. It doesn't have to be perfectly clean, just the wet paint rinsed out, and then stored up vertical so that the water can drain off into the tray. And last but not least, our dirty paint water just needs to be dumped out in the sink. If it's really messy, maybe give it a quick little rinse and then fill it back up halfway with cold water so that it doesn't ruin our paintbrushes. If your cup gets filled over halfway, just dump out the extra until it's halfway filled and then set it over to the side for the next class.